Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Now I'd like to welcome Krista Senna. She's an independent curator and gallery owner based in Brooklyn, New York. Krista has worked for the ICA in Philadelphia, the Queens Museum, and the New Museum in various capacities.
Hi, everybody. And thank you, Jack, for that warm and comprehensive introduction. Now we're on to the artist statement, which a lot of artists are the most terrified about, and for good reason. It's not easy to talk about your work, and it's certainly not easy to write about your work. So I completely sympathize. But this is necessary. And I think that it's also helpful in helping you think about your work in these ways. So first of all, an artist statement is an introduction to who you are as an artist. Someone who doesn't know you or wants to know you more as an artist can get a sense of your practice and of your process. It also gives us context about who you are and how you fit into the bigger picture of the art world, of contemporary art, of a particular art scene, of a particular genre, right? And it also grounds you. Why? Because you are writing with intention. You're talking about what you're investigating. You're talking about what you're interested in. You're talking about why you make the work you do. That is very important. And that's why I think it's something you can keep coming back to. I'm sure many of you do come back to it. And it's something that you can keep, you can use it as a tool to stay motivated, stay focused, stay grounded. And it's also something to come back to and alter when necessary. Oftentimes, you'll also make micro artist statements, which are statements that just describe one body of work. We're going to see an example of that later on, too. All right. So that was kind of why you need the artist statement and why it's important. So what is it? It's basically you telling the world, what do you make and how do you make it in 1 to 2 paragraphs. It's short, it's sweet, it's direct, but descriptive. So I'm doing something a bit unorthodox that I haven't done in the past in this order, which is I'm going to start with an artist statement that I don't think is very effective, and we'll read through it together or most of it. And then I will solicit your feedback as to why you think this artist statement is unclear and doesn't really convey the strength or real vision of this artist. So it starts, I'm fascinated by the construct of strata in any context. For example, geologically as a visible record of the continuous deposition of natural and human generated matter. Sociologically as an arbitrary categorization system, affording both separation and unification of humans, and psychologically has a chronological composition of our experiences. I actually can't even finish this. I'm so lost. I'm going to skip to the bottom. The pigment or character of one stratum irrevocable colors its neighbors, a disturbance in one level, beams or fissures outward through multiple others. Okay. There's a lot going on here, but at the same time, we don't really know what's going on all these sentences later. Why is this ineffective? Why did this not communicate the artist's vision to you? I, of course, have my answers, but I want to hear from you guys too. Put it in the chat, please, and we'll discuss.
So Kevin, sorry if I butcher your name, says it's filled with jargon and too ideological. Diane says,
bingo,
that's art speak. Amy, it sounds like something an art professor asked to be written, too many descriptions, but now how they relate to the artist, not how they relate to the artist's work. There are run-on sentences and a lack of clarity. Tomo says big words and vague. Jolie says word choices and concepts that the viewer might not be familiar with.
That's right. That's right.
Not using clear language to be described what is actually going on with the work. Ed says it's far too impersonal. Not descriptive of what the work looks like. Yeah, I always love a descriptive short description of what something is.
That's right, to give people a visual idea.
And Jody says, I have no idea what they do.
Bingo. Bingo. Everyone hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for that feedback. You touched on all of the points of what doesn't make a effective artist statement. So as we'll see, conversely, the opposite of all those points is what makes it effective. Here's another one that misses the mark and doesn't really tell us much. This is the name of the dance company. ... Dancing explores the liminal space that exists between art and nature by celebrating the art form that springs from our deepest embodied memories, dance. ... Dancing honors these harvested beech tree limbs by repurposing them for aesthetic purposes as dancers. Listen to the grateful souls of these strong and supple limbs as the suspended chimes move in the gentle breeze. Poetic, but not expressive. What's wrong with this one? Similar answers, I'm sure, to the last one, but if there's anything that jumps out at you that maybe wasn't mentioned, just share that with us in the chat now.
Jolie says, it sounds like it is a dance of trees.
I like that.
Amy says, needs better spacing and use of quotes, but they do think there's nice imagery there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say that too. And that's what the other statement lacked, right? Come to think of it, that last statement lacked imagery. At least this has some semblance of imagery, excuse me. It's just impartial. In general, the statement is unfinished.
Yeah, we have there should be more on the how. Also, Tomo says it's too abstract. And Jody says, I see this one as a brief statement of a particular artwork. Not as much on the practice. Diane says, doesn't really say what the work is about or the kind of dance that they do.
Exactly. It really reads as like a snippet. There's something there, but it hasn't been fully fleshed out, hasn't been completed. So it's fragmented. What is it missing? What do we need? So you all touched on all of this. From both of these statements, the language was too obtuse. I love that someone mentioned art speak. I cannot handle art speak. It completely obliterates comprehension and accessibility and access to the artwork. And it's actually more impressive when you're dealing with complex and complicated topics and theories, and you understand them so well and you have such good ownership that you can translate them into direct, comprehensible, clear language that we can understand. That in of itself is impressive and a feat and shows real ownership of those ideas. And that's not dumbing anything down. As you all mentioned, these statements were too abstract. The first one especially had no real visual comprehension. We are in the visual art world. We want to see things. We imagine things. We all have vision and like to look. So if the statement doesn't intrigue us and make us want to look and give us some idea of what we're potentially looking at, I think that that is a fail. No sense of process, practice. Please, you do not have to describe every single element of your practice, right, in your statement, but there's some hint or there's one key element, whether it's a material you work with or a tool or a antiquated practice that you're reviving. You know what I mean. We don't need a description of your entire process, but some mention of it, of the how, helps complete the circle here. The last statements missed clarity. And there was also a lack of intention, which then suggests a lack of relevance. How do you fit into the bigger picture? Why should we care? Why should we look? Why should we follow? Why should we buy? Why should we show the work, right? All of those things. You want to show that you are adding or altering what's already out there. You're adding to the conversation. You're engaging with the conversation with bigger ideas. Also, I believe it was Ed that said that the first statement and the second to a degree was impersonal. As we'll see, the artist statement needs to be personal. It is you speaking in the first person, right, about yourself versus the bio, which is a lot less detailed, has a different focus, but is also written from the third person. So there's a little more distance here. We don't want that distance there, excuse me. We don't want that distance here. All right, so now we're going to see a few statements that are a lot stronger and communicate the artist's vision or at least intention more effectively. Okay, so back to Juan. As the firstborn child of 2 Peruvian immigrants, it was easy to become obsessed with American culture. This led to my obsession with collecting every found object I could get my hands on. Using found objects as tools to play with in the studio has changed the way I look at my own trash and the trash around me. As a green artist, I have a responsibility to reduce my waste and the waste in my community. And I accomplish this by turning discarded items into art. Similar to many people in America, I'm conflicted by consumerism, and my artworks are a result of my own bad habits, desires, and classic American greed. Just take that in for a moment. That is a beautiful, well-written, clear, yet complex artist statement. Here, we can also check out some of the artworks. Think about what he talks about, what he talked about there. And then let's look at some of these images, and you can see how what he expresses in his statement, rings through in the images, in the artwork itself.
I think Jolie makes an interesting point. They say it makes me want to look at their art for the found objects. And I like that idea that it creates like hide and seek of engagement.
Exactly. I love that idea too. And I fully agree. Was it Jolie? Am I saying that right? Her name? I fully agree with that. It's like when the artist talks about their process or the intention, and it creates a sense of intrigue, that is a real success. All right, so that's one. All right. Sonia, I don't know personally and haven't worked with, but I followed her from a distance, and I would love to see her work in person. So I remember just doing some informal research for fun about her and some recent shows. And I came across this beautiful statement of hers, which is, barely a paragraph, yet so complete and so rich. I'm instinctively drawn to objects that connect to my personal narrative as a point of departure. A comb, a piece of cloth, a penny, or hair. I question these collective meanings. My stories, your stories, our stories are held in the object. In this way, the everyday thing becomes a lens through which we better see one another. Think about those objects that she mentions. Very relatable, right? Very personal, very relatable. Yet she's taking it to a more like universal macro perspective. And when we look at her work, some of those objects appear, or associations of those objects. Here this is very interesting. She divides it by concept. I love this. And each concept is essentially an object, right? So it ties right back to the statement. This piece is called stubble, toothless, right? Body parts, fleshy, hairy. Tendril, uncurl, split ends. Madam C.J. Walker, right? Now and then, hot comb afro, iterations. So wonderful. So resonant. Abraham Lincoln, Afro Abe. Hilarious, not afraid to be funny too, infuse some humor, why not? I love that. Let's see what projects entails. That's harder to see. Oh, fascinating installation here. Beaded Prayers, it's called. The Haircraft Project from Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Love it. Portraits of hairstyles. Lovely. Right? You get the idea. You get that connection between what she writes about and what she's working on, the ideas, the objects, the associations. Bravo. All right. Next, we have Lina Puerta. Lina, I've worked with quite a few times over the years, and I've really enjoyed following her and the evolution of her work. It's always very tactile, as we'll see, and she deals with some really, really relevant topics to contemporary life, urban life. Also, her Colombian American background plays a part. My work draws from my experience as a Colombian American artist, examining the relationship between nature and the human made, and engaging themes of food justice, xenophobia, hyperconsumerism, and ancestral knowledge. Notice that here she talks less about materials at first, but goes right into themes that she's interested in. I love that. I create mixed media sculptures, installations, collages, handmade paper paintings, and wall hangings by combining a wide range of materials, from artificial plants and paper pulp to found, personal, and recycled objects, right? She's giving us a picture. She's painting a picture for us. We know these objects, much like Sonia, right? We know those objects. We can think about them and what they mean and how we use them. I start a work with concept in mind. This is her talking about process, right? I start a work with concept in mind, but at the actual time of making, I manipulate materials intuitively, responding to the juxtaposition of colors and textures. Experimentation and layering are key to my practice as I push and play with materials and mediums. Bravo, chef's kiss. Another effective statement. So clear, so intriguing, just enough detail to give us a sense of what's happening behind the studio, makes us want to see the work, makes us want to talk to her about it. Let's take a look. All right, look at this. Ooh. Homepage image. She does these beautiful paper pulp paintings and tapestries. You can see how much color. You can see how she talks about layering, how that factors in. Let's see here. The Willard crops. These are some abstracted portraits of migrant workers, exactly Latino farm workers. She did a whole series of that. Handmade paper sculpture, tapestry series. Just delicious. A lot of these were in a solo show that she had at Smack Melon a few years ago. The detail is amazing. And then the farm workers. Just lovely. So relatable and intimate, but a sense of mystery there too. We know that she's interested in food justice, you know, how does it tie in? You just start asking those questions. And then here, right? Bio and CV, let's take a look just because. Bio, CV right underneath, goes straight into solo exhibitions, group exhibitions, awards, residencies, bibliography, education, right? Boom. And then her statement. I also like that on her website, she has a separate page for this statement. I actually don't see that a lot. And I actually really appreciate that. And I would encourage artists to include that on their website if they feel comfortable doing it, because it really fleshes things out, gives us more insight. So yes, notice that this first paragraph is what I read to you all. So that's like the core of her statement. That's almost like the thesis statement, right? Then she breaks down her statement. She has room here on her website. She breaks down her statement into 1, 2, and 3 more sections where she talks specifically about a certain body of work. So that's when I was telling you about how you have your general artist statement, right? Like Lena does here, which applies to all her work, to her vision, to her intention, how she makes the work, etc. And then you will find the need later on to make separate, smaller statements about a particular body of work to really make that more clear and to flesh it out for yourself and also the audience. So for example, she starts talking about her earlier work, interested in the female body, seeing it through the lens of nature, free of religious taboos and hypersexualization. My next series, Traces, further examined urban landscapes themselves as a collective body, incorporating concrete and tiled surfaces as they evolve with the passage of time. In 2016, through an artist residency with Dieudonné, I remember this, I began experimenting with handmade paper making, right? So then we see, oh, that's how you got into the paper pulp pieces. Tell us more. Layering pigmented paper pulp with various patterned and textured fabrics, then sculpting the surface with water and stencils. That then evolves into the Latinx farm workers in the US tapestry series. Then she ends with the most recent episode in her life, right? In the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, immediately we can all relate. I began the kinship series of paperworks that emerged from a personal process of reaching out for connection to ancestral indigenous knowledge that inspires a new relationships with plants, not only to the food or medicine they produce, but to their entire bodies and their accumulated wisdom. Interesting. And ends with, by integrating these two aspects of my mestiza ancestry, I seek to uplift undervalued knowledge and recuperate alternative ways of living and relating that can ensure a sustainable and biodiverse future for generations to come. Beautiful, beautiful. What a lot of these, I would say all of them actually, all of these effective artist statements have in common is that they are personal, they're from the first person, they start with a very intimate point of departure, but then the artist takes that intimate point of departure and threads it to the bigger picture and makes it relatable and more universal so that we can all have some kind of entry into the work. That's really powerful, right? To take something so personal and say, it's not about me. Here's what I'm interested in, why, but here's why it ties into a bigger picture and should be something you should be interested in as well. All these points you all mentioned early on, and we have just seen examples of, and we will continue to discuss with the Q&A. An effective artist statement employs personal touch, illustrates relevance to the bigger picture at the same time. It's concise. It's rooted in clear everyday language, and there's a strong sense of intention, which with any luck leads to intrigue. Thank you. And good luck out there.
Thank you so much, Krista. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I'll actually go back to this in case people want to keep looking at this, thinking about this as we answer questions.
Yeah, I also, I mean, I think back to the last session we were talking about, and the idea of story and having some sort of crafting of a story in your artist statement.
That's right.
I like I keep on going back to this idea that a story is something happened,
Yeah.
and I responded to it by doing this. And
I love that. I love that image and that framework.
Something happened and I am making this as a response.
Exactly. This is my response as an artist.
And it gives people that idea of the why.
Exactly.
So if
So
anyone
well said, Jack.
has questions, we're happy to field them. I know it's it's
a big topic. So if you're thinking and mulling through things, that's great. That's what you should be doing.